back to A Celtic State of Mind. It's 12:30, it's Thursday, and I am here with JP Mason. It's PJ Dykes and JP Mason. How are you doing, JP?
Good morning, good afternoon. Good to be here back in the studio.
It's always good to have you in the studio. It's a different experience when it's face-to-face, JP, rather than the dial-in, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't need to worry about what Celtic top I'm going to hang or football top behind me. And it's just, I don't know, just feels a bit more relaxed and natural.
First thing I want to bring up is obviously over the last 18 months almost, the Acsom Bulletin's been going out on a daily basis on the weekdays, and we always go out one day at the weekend. And we get loads of incredible messages, JP, from people who said that this was their anchor. I get called a lot of things that rhyme with that as well from people, but this was their anchor during the lockdown. It was great for their mental health. And I think it's only right that today of all days we actually put that out there, because I was incensed by a tweet that I saw there just the other day talking about how Scottish football doesn't benefit your mental health. And some of the comments that came in through that fact, I was astonished and saddened to see that people don't realise how important football is to communities of people, in society.
Aye, I mean, I really was astonished as well. I skimmed through a few of them and then just started to get really angry, because it's if you were to dismiss anything that helps someone's mental health, just because it's something that you don't have any interest in or don't like or think is beneath you or something like that, it staggers me. If you were to slag anybody else, say somebody was like really into Lego and that helped their mental health, what, are you going to slag off Lego and have a go at that? It just seems it's a really, really strange attitude to have when everything is so delicate at the moment, and as again in these times where again we're shut out of games, and you're starting to get shut off away from other people, encouraged not to see other people. So what do you have? What do you have to fall back on? You have your passions, and if one of your passions is football, then you're going to indulge in things like going to the games if you can, and also things that replace that, which are people talking about football like us.
Yeah, absolutely. See, the big thing about going to the game, though, and I always think that there's a certain level of society that's always looked down their nose at football culture and football fans as a support base, as a section of society, which is completely wrong. And that goes right into the political aspect of how I can go to Murrayfield and watch a rugby game and have a beer, and I can't do that in a football stadium at the same time. With the same capacity, let's say, of 50, 60,000 people, I can't do that in Scotland. So I think there's an issue there. Anyway, but in terms of the mental health, JP, it's not just that 90 minutes of football. I mean, people's whole days are centred around getting to the game, be that as part of a CSC or through in a motor with your mates or your brother or your old man or whatever it might be, whatever your kind of routine is. And then it's the aftermath of that as well. So, and also, a lot of people spend time with their family. I mean, I think back, we did a thing just last week there with a Celtic collection video, retrospective. And what I loved about looking at that old footage was that's me and my old man going to the games in the early 90s, you know what I mean? And it was a proper father and son bonding day, because I never saw him all week because he was at his work and I was at school, etc. So to turn around and say that football's not important to people's well-being mentally, I find absurd, and I think it's just inherently wrong. But I want to pinpoint the fact that also, if whatever happens, Acsom will be coming out at 12:30 every weekday, no matter what. I mean, we had a thing in here in Dalkeith a few weeks back, JP, where I don't even know if it was mentioned on the bulletin, but it was on a Friday, right? And there was just, the world stopped because there was no signal. There was no Wi-Fi. The world stopped in Dalkeith. Instantly, people are jumping in their car and fleeing Dalkeith because they couldn't get online. They couldn't check their phone. It was quite scary to see people's reaction. I couldn't get out of Dalkeith. I was stuck, right? So I'm phoning around the Acsom contributors saying, right, who's got working Wi-Fi? And let's get this set up. And we were able to put it out. But it was almost as if you were cut adrift, almost like in isolation.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are feeling like that during the fear of another lockdown, the fear of not seeing their friends and their communities or even their workmates, because I've been in jobs where you can moan about your work, JP, but there's a societal issue if you're not going into a workplace, if you're in a in a room in your house,
100%.
logging in, all that kind of stuff, and you're not actually getting that day-to-day interaction with other like-minded human beings. And hopefully we have that interaction with like-minded Celtic supporters. So I think it's really important. I'm not overstating Acsom's part in this. I'm just saying that football is important for people's mental health, and we shouldn't accept anybody who tells us otherwise, JP. I mean, over the piece, you've been going to watch Celtic for how many years? 25, 30 years?
88 was my first game. So, I mean, regularly since 96, 97, I would say, would be as in consecutive games and going to away games and all the rest of it. So, yeah, but that long, that's a huge commitment. And as Ange Postecoglou said, this is a generational thing. People have dedicated their lives to this and their children's lives. And obviously you'll get people that you know, turn their nose up at that and go, it's ridiculous. Why would you spend, you know, so much time? But it's a passion, it's an interest. And
it's not a choice.
It isn't a choice. Once you're in, you're in. It's not something you can just drop out of. And you know, I'm really glad that I'm in and able to experience the highs and lows of being a Celtic fan and all that it encompasses. You know, things like this, and you know, like you say, the match day, post-match, after, you know, post-match, pre-match rituals, all of that, and all the other things that it takes you, you know, to places you've not been to before in Europe, and, you know, experience different cultures and see how people react to Celtic fans en masse in the middle of Munich, for example. You know, when would you ever have experienced that if you weren't a football fan, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you like travelling, you travel through your work a fair bit, and hopefully that will continue in 2022. But there's always that thing where you see a set of hoops, JP, and you know that there's a like-minded individual there. No matter where you are in the world, you can go and speak to them, you can have a drink with them, and there's, you know, you share a state of mind, don't you?
Aye.
I always think back to my first game was 87. I'm not trying to get one-upmanship on it. It was the same season, but I went.
No, it was the season before. You were centenary season. I was 88, 89. It was one of the first home games of 88, 89. So, right. Yeah.
And the thing with 88, 89 was we're still wearing the centenary kit. Right, so you've got the memories of the previous season, which was like fairy tale, as Billy McNeil called it at the time. You've got largely the same group of players. I know that McAvenny leaves during the 88-89 season. But in terms of the spirit and the performances and all of these things, it was a completely different season. And obviously, you know, the last game of the season, the Scottish Cup final, you know, we stopped Rangers winning a treble. We beating them 1-0 that day. And that was a massive turnaround from the previous season where we've won the league in fairy tale fashion. And I think the biggest issue, I was talking to wee Joe Miller about this a few years ago, and it was basically what went wrong, Joe, you know? And he recalls it was either near the end of the centenary season or the beginning of the following season, and he's at Seamill Hydro. So it's probably one of the big cup games at the end of the season. And he's going for a walk, which was one of the traditions that I don't know if footballers still go for a walk with their teammates these days, but Joe and Billy McNeil goes for a walk, and they're talking about Billy's plans for the following season and the players that he wanted to bring in. And he actually believed that he might do something in Europe. Now, bearing in mind, Billy McNeil, as a manager, had taken us to the quarter-final of the European Cup in 1980 against Real Madrid. So he had ambitions to do something in Europe. We go into the pre-season. This isn't part of the agenda, by the way. We're just chewing the fat here. We go into that pre-season, and the board allowed me to sign two players. They're both goalkeepers. One of them's Alan Roth and one of them's Ian Andrews. So even back then, it shows the real lack of ambition that Celtic had in the boardroom at that stage, didn't it? And obviously, we had a really poor season had it not been for the Scottish Cup win against Rangers on the last day.
Well, it was the beginning of the dark times, wasn't it? You know, like that led into obviously 88-89, and then you got 89-90, and then from then on, it's just you know, a good few years of, you know, acknowledging the fact that we were nowhere near, you know, where we should be, and the level of player that came in was it was a bit erratic. You know, for every John Collins, there was a, you know, I'm trying to think of
John Hewitt.
Aye, or, you know, I was thinking, you always go for Stuart Slater as a kind of go-to guy to pinpoint, but there was so many others as well. I mean, I liked Pat McGinley, but was Pat McGinley a great Celtic player? No. It's things like that. So, you remember all these players, and then that's why when the good times come along, you appreciate the good times way more if you've if you've lived through those days when you're finishing third and fourth in the league and not getting anywhere near cup finals. Never mind getting to them. So yeah,
I always have the joke with Declan and Amy because they're a lot younger than myself. And up until last season, the worst they'd ever seen was that time we conceded a corner kick.
Aye.
You know what I mean?
I think Amy maybe needs some sort of therapy to get through. Last season must have been a real shock to the system for her, because I listened to her talk. She was just like, I don't know how to compute this in my head, that we're not, winning a treble or winning the league or whatever. And it does make you think. My friend's son, I think he's like maybe 8 or 9, and all he's experienced is Celtic winning all throughout that time. Never experienced that low of last season, and he never really experienced it in person either, because he goes to the games with his dad, but obviously never got to see anything because we weren't there. Which is, everyone has their own thoughts on that, but I mean, I just hated not being there, whether it was winning, losing, or drawing. Not being at the games was horrible, as it was the other day again with St Johnstone. I had a ticket, couldn't go.
No, absolutely. And again, going back to that community aspect of it, JP, I always think back to Lawrence Conley's come in to say Super Joe, talking about wee Joe there. Somebody else is saying that, I'm just casually name dropping.
Friend of the stars.
It does happen from time to time, and I apologise in advance. But that's only because I've bugged all these people for an interview at some point in my life, JP, and they've given in and given me an interview. And then, obviously, I've got them all somewhere on a laptop or on a dictaphone. And, it's always good to dig into these old chats that you've had.
But these guys are approachable. It's not as if we're talking about Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi or something like that. It's, and no disrespect to Joe Miller, by the way, great player for Celtic. But, as if he's not going to want to talk about his time at Celtic, it's the best time of his life.
Oh, it was. And, Joe's dad played. He played with Hamilton in Swindon Town. His name was also Joe. And he had a wee fruit shop in Glasgow, and it was in Sword Street, and it's now the penalty spot. So there's another wee name drop for Kevin Tate down at the penalty spot. Pay him a visit. Loads of great Celtic memorabilia. So when I was doing that video last week, and by the way, there was a period of time, probably over a 6-month period, JP, where I had a box of the old Celtic VHS tapes from back in the day when I used to get them at Christmas and birthdays and all that kind of stuff like everybody else. But I realised I didn't have them all. So I went online to see if I could find a comprehensive list. Where do you find that kind of thing? Normally it's a Celtic wiki, right? So I go into the wiki and there is a list, but there was some editions missing, etc. So I think I managed to put a list together of every Celtic VHS, and I think there's 60, right? So we've done one, which was last week, the collection, volume 1. And next week, when Kelvin, the video expert, stroke specialist, aficionado, freak of nature when it comes to videography, comes back in, we'll get on to number 2, and we're going to work our way through the entire collection of 60 Celtic videos. We started off in probably the worst times in 1991, but looking back on that, though, as I say, it brings back a lot of bizarre memories for me, because Tony Cascarino gets bought for 1.1 million, and I'm not just saying this with hindsight, but at the time I remember having a conversation that we should be buying somebody like Bernie Slavin, who wanted to sign for Celtic. We could have got him for 750 grand. It would have been a different type of player, Celtic daft, all that kind of stuff. I didn't actually think we needed a striker at the time, but if you're going to spend £1 million on Cascarino, why not get Slavin? You mentioned Slater. I would have signed Pat Nevin instead of Stuart Slater. I think you'd have got more out of Pat Nevin at that time.
Was that a possibility?
Well, he, in his recent book, he's written part 1 of an autobiography. There's a couple of occasions where Celtic could have signed him. And one of them was when he went to Tranmere. So he went to Tranmere from Everton. And it was at that stage, early 90s. That's when we could have got him. We had talks with Paul McGrath. We could have had Paul McGrath in, but we bought Gary Gillespie, we bought Tony Mowbray. So we were spending a lot of money, but we weren't actually getting the quality that we required at that time. And the only thing that came good of Cascarino was the fact that we swapped him for Tommy Boyd in the end. Hindsight is a great thing. You're absolutely right. But anyone who went to the games at the time watching Cascarino, they didn't need hindsight to know that he just wasn't up to the job. I remember that Hearts game, right? So it's 10 games into his Celtic career. Comes on as a sub. Tommy Coyne lays him on. Henry Smith's beaten. He's got an open goal to score into. He hits it with his heel. He almost misses, right? But that's his first goal in a Celtic jersey. 5-6 minutes later, he hooks Craig Levine and gets sent off. That was Tony Cascarino's introduction as a Celtic goal scorer.
I'm sure quite a few people would like to do that.
Well, perhaps. Acsom documentary featuring the old videos was really good. We're going to do every individual video, and I was telling JP about some of the other ideas that we've got going into 2022. Short documentary style content on the YouTube channel. So if you haven't done so already, get yourself onto the YouTube channel, subscribe free of charge, hit the notifications bell. We are going to talk about the here and now, JP. We're a quarter of the way into the show, and we're still in 1991. The headline on today's bulletin is actually, how did Ange resurrect the Celtic careers of Tommy Rogic, Tony Ralston and Neil Bitton? And there's loads of other things to discuss, but this is one of the talking points that, had you and I at any point last season spoken about any of these three guys, you might have been a wee bit sad to see the back of Tom Rogic because he gave us some great memories. But they seem to be on the periphery of the Celtic squad. JP, had they left in the summer, it would have been hey-ho. A lot of Celtic players leave every summer, and it would have been one of their ones. Let's go through them individually, starting with Tommy Rogic. Maybe the obvious one, because they had worked together with Australia, and a few people had said, Tommy Rogic, we're going to see a different side to Tommy Rogic because Ange Postecoglou knows the player. I think he's kind of moving into the territory of having his finest season in a Celtic jersey.
Aye, no doubt, absolutely no doubt. And if you saw the, unfortunately, obviously, like many of us watching the game on TV, I was actually at my uncle's in Aberdeen watching it on my phone with one earphone in. My uncle can't stand football, isn't bothered about it. Actually moved to Aberdeen to get away from the Central Belt Rangers Celtic thing in the 70s. I think he moved, late 70s, he moved up there. So he's been there ever since. Doesn't care about football. So I'm sort of sitting watching the game on the fly. But one thing I did notice that at the end of the game when Rogic came off, him and Postecoglou exchanged a kind of wee nod. Like, I don't know if you saw that. Rogic just gave him a kind of, there was no big hugs, like Furuhashi style in the cup final. There was just a kind of nod from Rogic to Postecoglou as if to say, job done. I've done my job for you today, type thing. And Postecoglou just went like that. They had a wee high five. And that is the thing. He did do his job. He's doing his job and winning games for Celtic, playing really well, putting himself forward to be man in the match in many, many games, which, and contributing in a way that he hasn't previously. And I think I've spoken about this before when we've been talking about players and their contributions in the last, however many seasons. Obviously, Rogic has been here for what, 9 seasons? 8-9 seasons?
I was looking at that. This is his 9th season.
Yeah, that's quite wild to think that. Mm-hmm. But his contributions in those times have been sporadic. Obviously, at times, absolutely monumental. Like the goals against Rangers Cup finals. Never really been that great in Europe. If I'm honest, I don't really think Tom Rogic. Can you really remember any huge Tom Rogic games in Europe in the past? Probably not.
That's a good point.
But at this season, it's consistency. It's playing far more minutes in a game than he's ever done before. Playing with a strength, holding off players, really looking like someone that just doesn't want to get beat in that team. And the more people like that you've got in your team, the better. And obviously, he's blessed with unbelievable touch, skill, can finish so well, and he's really staking a claim to be one of the guys that, should we be fortunate enough to get our hands on the trophy that we all want to get our hands on again, the roar that would greet Tom Rogic lifting that trophy, if that was to happen, would be something else, because he's lifted it before, and when players gets down the pecking order to players and they lift the trophy, and the cheers at the start are huge for the first players, and then as they get down, it's kind of like way, and it just comes like, he was one of the way players.
Right.
It wasn't one of the proper like everyone going absolutely mental. And Rogic, I think maybe I don't know the guy, don't really know much about him. He doesn't give much away. There's very few interviews with Tom Rogic.
Apparently he doesn't like speaking to the media. I've heard that.
Well, it's obvious because we don't really know. I don't know much about Tom Rogic. I can't tell you what he is like as a guy or anything like that. So, but maybe, I'm just guessing, maybe he's kind of thinking, look, my career's coming not to an end. I mean, he's only 29. I mean, he's got a few years left, but maybe he's kind of thinking, look, I've not got long of this left. I was nearly out the door to Qatar, where I would have been playing in like a football in backwater.
Semi-retirement.
Yeah, I mean, I want to make this count, and he's doing it.
When you consider the fact he's been with Celtic for 9 seasons, I remember not that long ago when Scott Brown got his testimonial. And I think I probably asked the question on the podcast when it was an audio pod back then. Is this the last of a dying breed? Are we ever going to see this again? Because I remember going back to the 90s and the 80s, there was quite regular testimonial games. And I mean, if you think of the 1980s, Danny McGrain, Roy Aitken, Tommy Burns, my first game, testimonial games, Davy Provan got a testimonial. Not many of the Lions got testimonials, interestingly enough, especially when you see the longevity of a lot of their careers. And then you move into the likes of Peter Grant, Pat Bonner, Paul McStay. There was always a clutch, through the decades, but it was getting less and less. I don't think the benefit game for Ralston can be called a testimonial because it was a 7-year thing. But then you had like Jackie Mack got his testimonial.
Tommy
Boyd, yeah. I remember that as well. I remember that game. Somebody come in on the comments if I'm wrong here. I think between Jackie and Scott Brown there were no testimonials.
That was
quite a lengthy period of time. Probably the longest period of time, JP, since the first testimonial game that Celtic gave for one of their long-serving players. And now we're in this scenario when we've got Jamesy Forrest, Callum McGregor, who are guaranteed testimonial games, and then just behind them, Tom Rogic and Near Bitton. He's in his 8th season, moving into his 9th year next season. And I never thought I'd see that in this modern day, that would have 4 players who, within the next 3 or 4 years, potentially could have testimonials. JP, now, how has that happened? Is that just a cycle? Is it because there was a period of time, perhaps under Brendan Rodgers, I would suggest, where it looked as though we did have a more long-term plan? Because previous to that, it was like almost just like season to season, win the league, especially through the 9 in a row era. It became, you just wanted to get that next one on the board towards 10. The longevity, where did that come in? Do you think a lot of that can be credit can be given to Brendan Rodgers to give them the kind of vision that they might stay at the club longer? I think Rogic and Bitton, there's an element of luck there.
Yeah, I mean, I think James Forrest has touched on this, that he's spoken to players who have left Celtic and realised that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. It's not as if you're going to go and play at a club like Celtic anywhere else. Really, there's not really comparisons. To go and play in England, you're not going to play like you play at Celtic with that intensity and European football and everything else. And it may or may not be because they like living in Glasgow. I think Near Bitton, as far as I know, is quite happy in Glasgow, and has got family here and everything else. So maybe he's just sort of thinking in those terms. But I wouldn't want to be as cynical as to say that they're playing towards a testimonial. I think the testimonial. We spoke about this, and I said maybe in the summer we were talking about how absurd it was that Near Bitton was approaching a testimonial at Celtic, and I was thinking, the guy's only played however many games it is for Celtic. He's never really contributed. That you could never really hang your hat on a trophy, be it a league title or a cup competition, and say that was Near Bitton played such a huge part in that. He didn't in the league runs. Near Bitton for me didn't ever really have this kind of impact on the team in a season that would make you go, like you say, when the league trophy's been lifted at the end of the season, Near Bitton would just be like a, you know, I mean, no disrespect to the guy,
that's even lesser than the last year.
I know, but I mean, it's true though. I mean, we've watched the team over this period of time. We've seen who's contributed and who's not, and I did say at the time, you know, if Near Bitton was to contribute something, then maybe the idea of a testimonial wouldn't be as absurd. You know, if Near Bitton plays a part, which he has done this season, yes, he's not been man of the match every week or anything like that, but he's definitely helping the team out and putting in performances that are getting us results when we really, really need them. You know, like the other week there, obviously St Johnstone, and you know, he's come in and played in midfield, which is his natural position, and looked far more assured. And I don't think anybody ever really questioned whether or not he was a decent enough midfielder. I think we could all just question his judgment and his temperament, as we saw against Midtjylland, you know, where that was just completely unnecessary in a game of such high stakes to do something as rash as that. You know, that certainly made me at that time go, whoa, I'm you know, fully off this sort of Near Bitton idea of him being a first team player. But, you know, he's come in, he's done the job, and like you say, Ange Postecoglou is getting a tune out of him that maybe previous managers haven't. And, you know, we're just speculating as to Postecoglou's man management, but we're seeing the results of it and the fruits of it in front of our eyes. You know, we've seen him working with players that we've seen not contribute, and now they are, and he's the difference. So therefore, you attribute it to Ange Postecoglou.
Yeah, we do. We do give a lot of credit. I mean, some of the points you made there. 8 seasons Near Bitton's been at Celtic. This is his 8th campaign, 250 games. And I think that speaks, and a lot of them are substitute appearances as well, JP. So I think that speaks volumes. You're talking about the cheers that go down the line when you've won a trophy, and you've got the rapturous applause followed by the one that you said earlier about Tommy Rogic, yay, and then you've got that one there, it was a wee bit like that, right? But then you've got the ironic cheer that the likes of Marvin Clonfair used to get when he went up for his medal, where everybody cheers because it's Big Marvin. But another thing about Near Bitton is I've got to go back to that Midtjylland game, and I probably made similar comments last season after the Rangers game when I got sent off, where I would have happily not seen him playing in a Celtic jersey again. Now, I'd need to re-watch the post-match after the Midtjylland game, but I was raging with Near Bitton that day. Absolutely raging with him. And I just thought, no, that's it. You know, you've not done enough in a Celtic jersey. This is the last straw. I was annoyed at you last season. Game over for you. And then the last game there against St Johnstone, he runs out as a captain. And nobody could argue that. And he puts in one of the best performances he's put in a Celtic jersey. Scores a goal. It was a proper leader's performance. So I've said this before. We get it wrong at times, or do we? I mean, was I wrong to criticise him? Probably went over the top to the criticism of him at that time, JP. But, I mean, he's proved us wrong, and I'm sitting here today saying that the biggest turnaround for me, on a personal level, would probably be Bitton, because I always rated Rogic. You know, I knew what he could do. And Tony Ralston, I just didn't think he had the run of games that any player needs to prove or disprove their ability. And that does move us on to Tony Ralston. Absolute, you know,
a candidate for player of the season. Certainly for Celtic. Maybe people would argue and say, oh, he's not got a chance of player of the season overall in the league. But, you know, certainly for Celtic's player of the season, you know, and that's wild to think that you'd be saying that when you've got the likes of Kyogo Furuhashi and Jota in the mix as well. But it's a reality. It's a reality, and it's the world we're living in that Tony Ralston is completely and utterly shoved every bit of criticism that we've levelled at him back at us.
See, the big thing, we opened up the show talking about mental health, and I always go back to this with Tony Ralston, JP, right? So, yes, they're footballers, but it doesn't make them invincible in terms of their mental wellness. Things do affect them. They're human beings, JP. And I've heard stories about footballers who have had to come off social media after
no wonder.
Specific
incidents.
You know, they've had to come off because of the criticism.
Ryan Christie did it.
Christie got sent off against Livy away. and it was just this outpouring of frustration and people being targeted. Now, Tony Ralston was the whipping boy, even when he wasn't playing. He was always spoken about as some kind of joke character that would never kick a ball for Celtic until we've got like 13 players down after the Dubai debacle, right? And then he comes in, played pretty well, and he's back out again. And this is a guy who had come in 17 years of age, similarly to Kieran Tierney, who was 17. He comes into the team, performed well enough for Rodgers to give him a bumper deal, which just ran out in the pre-season pass there. There was that famous or infamous picture of him and Neymar, where he's laughing at him. And I didn't think that aged that well, but Tony has had the last laugh, hasn't he?
Well, certainly, and anybody that doubted him. The reason I doubted him was just because you think when players go out on loan to, a St Johnstone or Dundee United and get, a run of games, I don't even really know. I'd need to study and see what he did at that time in those games, at those clubs, and to see how often he played. But you never really got these reports back that he was, this sort of standout player for them. And you expect, whether it's being big-headed or not, but you expect a Celtic player, to go to a club in our division and perform, perform well anyway, certainly to perform at a level that is befitting of the fact that they're a Celtic player, Yeah. I mean, you look at Lee Griffiths scoring that free kick at the weekend, if Lee Griffiths is as good as he says he is, I would be expecting Lee Griffiths to be pinging things like that in every week. He hasn't been, So
I think that was his second goal.
It was only his second goal. I mean, it was an absolute rakery, a free kick. There's no doubt about that. But when a Celtic player, and I know Lee Griffiths is a bit of different circumstance. He's not a young player going out to get experience. He's a guy who we gave a contract to, and then clearly, probably shouldn't have. But Ralston going out, like McGregor going to Notts County, or Ayer going to Kilmarnock, or all those guys went out and played at a level, and obviously came back with maybe not gold stars, but certainly silver stars. And Ralston came back and gave us no knowledge or no encouragement that he was going to be a guy that was going to solve our problems at right back. He came back and it was just going to be like, oh well, he's just another guy that's in the books that might get a game every now and then, and probably his contract will run down and probably he'll leave. And nobody, including me, would have been bothered if Ralston had left in the summer. But whatever has happened with that guy, whether it's him personally, whether it's, Postecoglou, I have no idea. Maybe it's a combination of all those things have come together to allow him to perform at a level that none of us really thought he could. Because he's just, he's going to give you everything in every game now. And it's almost like because he's done it once, he knows he can do it, and therefore he can get back. He can get to that level in every game because he knows that he can be a man of the match player, and it's so great to see because he's obviously Scottish. We've brought him through the ranks, and I'd happily see 11 players of the same ilk.
You've always said that.
Aye. I mean, 100%. We've spent so much money on guys that don't care about the jersey, don't care about the club, happy to get a paycheck and then check out and leave. And we've made them rich guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's that we've basically set them up for life, and they've not given us anything back. I mean, everybody moans about the amount of money players get, and yes, it is a bit insane how much they get paid. But if a player comes in and does well for Celtic and gives us the memories and the success that we, it's all relative, isn't it? It's about how much money the club makes as a result of that player and the success and everything else. I don't think anybody could begrudge Henrik Larsson having, a healthy bank account as a result of being at Celtic, because
that benefit game, and he also released 2 VHS videos which will all be featuring in the series.
The Magnificent Seven, was that one of them?
And one of them was tongue in cheek.
Oh yeah.
Scored a ton.
Oh, no, it's not a Magnificent Seven. The tongue in cheek one is one. I had that. I don't know where it's gone, but I had that. Yeah, it was good.
We will be covering that, Jay.
Good.
Some great points coming through. Brown Warrior, thanks for getting involved. Celtic have always been the biggest draw for testimonials due to the big gates. Yes, and I remember reading about that, JP, in the Not the View, which was my Bible in the 1980s and the 90s. and there was quite a few lined up at the time. So we were lined up to play Paul Davis, testimonial down at Arsenal. We had Neville Southall, Everton, Ian Rush, Liverpool, Brian Robson, Manchester United, all within the space of a few years. And we were also meant to be going back to Everton to play Graham Sharp's testimonial.
Oh, yeah.
And it didn't happen. And I remember there being a wee article in the Not The View talking about how there are certain players who just want Celtic for the crowd, because I think Graham Sharp was a Rangers fan. So he's obviously realising that we would take X amount of thousand down to the game. So they was actually just like using us for the gate.
Yeah,
you know?
I was at Jimmy Phillips' testimonial against Bolton Wanderers. Yeah, Jimmy Phillips, is that right? Was that his name? He was ex. I'm pretty sure he was ex Rangers as well. And we agreed to play Bolton Wanderers at Reebok Stadium, and we filled the away end. Well, I was at that with my dad. Yeah,
Murty. Did we not play Murty in his testimonial?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Aye.
Yeah.
Sure we did. But we were the biggest draw. You're absolutely right, Bring Warrior. And then they started using us as a result of that. Tony Mowbray, remember his testimony in Middlesbrough as well. I wasn't at that particular game, but I heard that the mood around about that wasn't great. Brian Murphy, there was a bit of hassle at the stadium that day. Brian Murphy, Jackie Mack got a testimonial and then went to Wolves. There were no testimonials for a long time after that. I think, Brian, the next one from a Celtic player's perspective was Scott Brown. Somebody could correct me if I'm wrong. Finn Fogel, testimonials were held to give players a big payday due to them not having great wages through their careers. Players make so much money now. Absolutely. And I think, was Niall Quinn the first guy, though, that came out and said that? He got a testimonial. He says, listen, I've made good money through my career, and he gave all the money to charity. And I think he was the first one to do that. We also went down and played Mark Hughes' testimonial.
Dare he be mentioned?
I'll always mention Sparky. That's another
Loved him for Man United, yeah.
Oh, he was brilliant. He was absolutely superb.
See if you can hear Peter Grant's chat about his testimonial. There's an interview somewhere. I can't remember if it's on video or if it's just if I've just read it, but he did not expect an attendance that night. Like, it was at Bayern Munich we played.
Yeah, it was. Klinsmann and Matthias.
Yeah.
Over Can.
Yeah, he didn't expect an attendance that night, and I think somebody came into the dressing room, might have been Tommy Burns, and said, you should see the queues out there. And Peter Grant, I think, thought he'd just said that to make him feel better, because I think he thought there was only going to be like a paltry crowd or whatever. And he said he was just overcome with emotion when he went out and saw how many people had turned out for him. And I don't know what the exact attendance was. I'm pretty sure it wasn't
40 plus.
Yeah, it was not a sellout, but
it wasn't the full.
No,
Celtic Park at the time.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that was the temporary stand days.
Aye, probably wrong. No, it probably was.
I was at the game. I remember being at the game, and the wee guy ran on the park to get Klinsmann's autograph.
Oh yeah. Aye.
Who was that? Are you watching? Reveal yourself. David O'Leary testimonial. Arsenal versus Celtic. Pierce O'Leary played. That's right. There's some great pictures from that game as well. And yeah, they did seem to be a thing of the past. Pedro Mack comes in, Gary Kelly at Leeds. There was more Celtic fans in Leeds at Elland Road. It seemed to be a thing of the past, but then lo and behold, we've got a few players in the works for a testimonial. Now, I'm going to ask you a question about each of the players that we've spoken about so far, JP. Tony Ralston, is he our first choice right back, or is Juranovic? I've seen a lot of chat around that question over the last couple of weeks.
We haven't really seen Juranovic play a consistent number of games now in a row as right back. It's been quite erratic. I mean, God, was it the cup final where he played he played like right back, left back, and then right wing.
Yep.
So he's kind of been just willing to sort of put his hand up and play anywhere, which is an admirable sort of thing to do, but he's not been at right back for a run of 4 or 5 games. So I don't really know if I could say that Juranovic should get that nod ahead of Ralston when Ralston's played so well and played consistently well as right back. I mean, there'll be still people in comments on this that'll be like, "Nah, Ralston's not good enough," and that is a really hard line to take on the Tony Ralston situation if you're actually going to be that committed to your principles that you can't see past, just because he's not fashionable or because he's...
Even Colin Watt has come round
really? Well,
to
there you
the
go.
fact that Ralston is a player.
Oh yeah, I was listening to Laura and Colin's podcast in my hotel room last night in Edinburgh, and
That's because Acsom put you up in hotels before.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I was DJing a wedding, and it was very enjoyable too. But I was listening to the podcast. I only got to the defence and the ratings of the defence before I fell asleep. So the last I heard before my eyes shut was Starfelt and Carter Vickers. But I did hear Colin Watt, I think, give Tony Ralston an A if he was rating Tony Ralston. Wow. It was either an A or an A plus, which is high praise from Colin. So
absolutely. I'm just having a look at the comment section. We are in here on our own today, so I'm having to do the old blocking, so I'm not going to apologise if you're blocked. It's for good reason. And there was a couple of other wee points came in here. Someone said, I'll need to dig it out. Someone actually said, Celtic podcasts, a good thing or a bad thing? Right, now, you might say, oh, you would say that, Paul, but I'm going to say they're a very good thing. And the reason for that goes right back to the opening salvo of this particular show. Now, Acsom's no longer a podcast. Podcast is what we started off as, audio. You could get it on your iTunes and all the different audio players and all that kind of stuff, JP. And then we decided to build it into something a wee bit different. And lo and behold, you get live streams, but you also get fully produced content. Wee mini documentaries are coming your way. A Celtic State of Mind has the YouTube channel. That's where we put all our content. And it's all free. Are they a good thing or a bad thing? Well, all I'm going to say to that is there's a lot of negativity flying around society at the best of times anyway, JP, but you see a lot of it on social media. And I'm not talking about podcasts, just in general, a lot of negativity kicking about. And so if you do a Celtic podcast, you get criticised. But I'll tell you, all the contacts that we get from people who like what we do outweigh anybody who just throwing mud at you, And we had a good chat about that this morning, didn't we, JP? Mm-hmm. People who actually contact you directly, send you emails, and even Christmas cards. I showed you a Christmas card that we got from one of our listeners. Absolutely astonishing. People send us stuff that we can raffle off for the charity that we're raising funds for St Mary's. The link's underneath the video. So, yeah, you might think I'm biased, but I'm going to say Celtic podcasts, and I don't just mean Acsom. Celtic podcasts, good thing. What's your thoughts, Kev? Kev? JP, what's your thoughts?
Wait, let me just produce my book of poetry and I'll give you my answer. Available from Acsom.net, by the way. I mean, see if you're just to take it from the point of view as being a contributor to this, to be part of this and to have contributed over the last 18 months longer now. Well, no, actually, it's been a year for me. It's been a year.
When was your first appearance? When you came up to Stirling?
I was on, as a guest and interviewed by yourself and Kevin in August 2018. Mm-hmm. So, and then nothing after that. We just, remained in touch and whatnot. But I think the first time I was on was December last year. So I think it was after a St Johnstone game, maybe the 1-1 game.
Griffiths game, maybe.
The 1-1 game at home. Right. And obviously at that point I'm sitting in my flat, can't see anybody, watching the game on the past the Paradise, and just to get involved in it, at that time was immense for me as something to help me out at that time and have a purpose and have something to look forward to, whether it was the Bulletin or getting involved in the post and pre-match bulletins around the games, because I wasn't going to the games, wasn't doing my usual thing. So just to be able to sit and talk to people about the games, and yes, it might be broadcast, but it was either that or you would just sit on the phone and talk to your mates, which you didn't really do. So like if it's structured and it's put together like this, then it is a bit more kind of organised, and yeah, it really, really helped me. But then the sort of kickback to that is people getting in touch and meeting people in the street recently who've given comment and said thanks, and it seems bizarre to be thanked for sitting talking about Celtic just something that you love doing. And yeah, I mean, obviously, like you say, there is negativity flying about, but I'm the same as you. I tend to sort of park that and just focus on the good things that people have said.
You've got to. The big thing about the negativity is a lot of it is absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
Just because somebody says something online doesn't make it true.
No.
And that's the big thing, JP. But I'm not about to give airtime to anybody who throws that kind of mud at Acsom. But what I would say is you reintroduced me to something fairly recently. And there was a great section of that which I sent you during the week there. If you've never seen the Defiant Ones with Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine, it's on Netflix, isn't it?
Yeah.
4-part series, absolutely superb, goes right into the roots of both the guys' careers, how they came together and how they eventually sold Beats to Apple for something like 3.2 billion quid. And they were talking to Iovine about how humans should act like racehorses. Get the blinkers on, because the minute you look at what anybody else is doing, you end up falling over. And that, for me, is what Acsom does, because I know there's loads of great Celtic content makers out there. There's great podcasts. We come together once a year, JP. There's absolutely no drama. We had, I think, 14 podcasts this year on the Charity Weekender, a few more last year. There is no pod wars. It's not East Coast, West Coast rap kind of levels here. And they're doing so much great work, but I simply don't have the time to watch everything else. There's so much of them out there.
I barely have time to watch ours.
Yeah, exactly.
I was catching up in my bed last night of the Bulletin yesterday, just because I always like to, keep on top of everything. But I haven't watched or listened to the rest of yesterday's Bulletin yet, so how the hell would I have time to watch rival clubs content? I mean,
I don't get that.
That's mental.
No, and saying that, there's a couple of people that come in regularly, like Paul Cockwell, who's a Hibs fan.
Yeah.
We've had Dundee United fans in the chat. Great, love it. Let's have a chat about it. Just previously on the Scream of Celtic show, Johnny Proctor, Dundee United fan, was on, and he was going on about Ralston, and he gave us a wee insight into his performances at Dundee United.
Right.
Apparently played pretty well for Dundee United. But I never heard it at the time. I never heard that from St Johnstone fans, and certainly never heard anything about his time at Queen's Park. So I think it's good to engage. That's the biggest thing. And there's a community of people online, and we've got to remember that it's not just a wee bubble. I mean, we get comments from people all over the world. Since Ange and Kyogo came into Celtic, you can see the heat map on our analytics that more people are tuning in from Australia, more people are tuning in from Japan, and that blows my mind when you're going out there and people in Vatican City are watching Acsom. I love all that kind of stuff. But that does take me on to the Japan subject and new players coming in. It seems to be ramping up a few notches, JP. We have heard all about Daizen Maeda, Ryo Hatate, and Yosuke Ideguchi, and I'm sure my pronunciations of all the three players will get better as time goes on. I'm excited. I'm excited about bringing them in. I think that there will be a springboard there also for Kyogo to have some of his countrymen there with him, and it's bound to help. It's bound to help. But, and I'm not being negative here, my concern is we need more. We need more than that.
Yeah, it does seem like those are the only three names that we've heard, and we've not heard anything else. But we know that there's likely to be outgoings, you would have thought, given the lack of game time for the likes of Bolingoli, Ayeti. I know Barkas played at the weekend. Again, negativity directed towards Barkas, and this sort of almost, he's become this sort of lampooned comedic figure, He's not played enough games to warrant that, it's not as if he played the whole of last season. I think he played maybe, 15 to 20 games last season or something like that, and playing behind a defence that was calamitous at best.
Yeah, and ever-changing.
There was very rarely a settled back four, and then people were quick to say, he was at fault for the Kane goal against St Johnstone. I'm like, really? Was he? It was a really good ball, and the defence lost him in mid-flight, and he connected well with it. I very much doubt Joe Hart would have got to that, or many keepers really. So I think there's been a targeted campaign against Barkas, which I think is preposterous, really. I mean, I don't think he's a terrible keeper. He's just not had the best of fortune at Celtic, and arrived at a time, one of the worst times possible to arrive at the club, which happens sometimes, like players come at the wrong time and then come good, maybe a year or two later. And sometimes players arrive and start really well and then disappear into obscurity after, I think Ayeti started pretty well. Everybody thought, well, this guy looks all right. He can score a goal or two.
Yeah.
And now he's, he's kind of, now he's become a bit of a joke figure as well. But yeah, these guys coming in, Maeda, it's interesting that it's a loan with an option to buy. Why that is, I don't know. Maybe they're just sort of concerned that he might not hit the ground running as well as Kyogo Furuhashi has. I really don't know. It's a bit of a strange one, but ultimately he looks like a really strong player, and we need reinforcements up top, as we've seen, having to play Abada through the middle. Obviously did okay against St Johnstone, but it's not something I would like to see us rely on for the second half of the season, which is obviously why Maeda is coming in. But I certainly think we still need a centre half and probably another midfielder as well, like a proper midfielder, someone that would, pick up a jersey and keep a hold of it.
Well, that takes me back to Bitton. We've spoken about Ralston and his kind of place in the team. Rogic's a first pick, we know that. Where's Bitton in the pecking order?
I mean, he's definitely pushed himself into contention for that slot in midfield to play regularly. But I just don't know if you could hang your hat on him to be that guy. He's never been the best with injuries. He picks them up quite often.
Yeah.
And nobody really knows what's happening with McCarthy. I thought McCarthy played okay the other day. But again, there's question marks over him. I just think that we definitely need another midfielder in there, because Turnbull's now out. Apparently Turnbull's out for 2 months. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but if Turnbull is going to be out for 2 months, then you worry that 2 months could become 3, and then that's you deep into the business end of the season. So maybe that would have changed people's thinking in the recruitment department, whatever that is, or whoever that is at Celtic, to look at a midfielder now that Turnbull could potentially be out, because I don't know what position Ideguchi plays really. Like, I don't really know what his what is he ranked? Is
he plays central midfield or attacking midfield?
Okay, well, in that case, that might be an answer to our problems. I think Hatate is a left back or left wing back.
Or centre midfield. What I was impressed with these three players is their adaptability, JP.
Yeah.
They're not just buying somebody who can play one role. They've all got that adaptability. So Hatate can fill in at left back and left wing. A wee bit like Liam Scales. But he can also play central midfield.
Well, Postecoglou knows these guys pretty well, I would say, far better than any of us. So the thing that you don't want is, at the end of the window, Ange Postecoglou to not be happy with what he's got in. If he's happy with those three guys and thinks that we can run with that until the end of the season, then fine. But if he's looking for more and doesn't get more because of poor planning or the wrong person being in the recruitment department or whatever, or whether it's Michael Nicholson or whoever, you don't want that kind of upset, because he should be given all the tools that he can, especially after the absolute nightmare that was the summer transfer window, where he was, didn't know if it was New Year or New York. So that's
Shrove Tuesday or Sheffield Wednesday.
Aye, that's got to be amended for this transfer window. And I know January is a difficult window to get players in, and there's that's kind of the fable and the myth about January transfer windows. But maybe for once we might actually do it right.
I hope so, because I think January and I think Ollie Burke. Now, Ollie Burke,
Where?
I think, I don't know, Timo Weah. Yeah. I think Ollie Burke, potentially, is the Scottish footballer with the highest amount of accumulative transfer fees in the history of football. I think he is. And if there's somebody out there who's got more, give us a shout. I know that there was players like Stephen Fletcher who had loads Obviously, Tierney with a £25 million move. The other one was maybe quite surprising. Jordan Rhodes, I think, has got quite a high a cumulative transfer fee. But Ollie Burke, straight out of Kirkcaldy, has got one of the highest, but it just didn't happen for him at Celtic. I think he played pretty well at Tynecastle on one occasion. Red Scotland comes in. Jim Orr is dynamite. I agree with that. But I think Donny meant the other Jim Simonetti, a good friend of us. Jim Simonetti was instrumental in setting the studio up, and he used to come on a regular basis, but is concentrating elsewhere, his work. But yes, a very good guy and a big friend of A Celtic State of Mind. Yes, thanks everybody for getting involved in the chat. Donny Boy 67 comes in to say that it's a big part of the life kind of experience getting involved in the chat. And someone else runs with that kind of suggestion as well and says it's good when people are disagreeing. What I would say on a disagreement stakes is that I think there's a lot of different views in amongst the 14 or so contributors that we've got, JP, but it very rarely turns into an argumentative discussion. You can disagree without it kind of descending into an argument or kind of shock jock tactics. But I mean, I disagree with a lot of things.
So do I. I hear things all the time, and then I go, "What?" I mean, I'm not going to name names, probably because I can't cite examples, but I've definitely heard, excuse me, people on the Bulletin say things, and I kind of like shake my head, go, "Nah, don't agree with that," you know. Or people making judgments about players too soon, as one thing that I've been mindful of. But it's all healthy. So everybody's a Celtic fan.
I keep sending out the agenda, but nobody reads it. The agenda according to Paul John Dykes, JP, but nobody reads it, and they just have their own freedom of thought, which I think is a disgrace.
My inbox is empty on that front. I've never.
You've never been told what to say.
No.
Music. We love music, JP. We love it, and we speak about it from time to time. It's at that moment of the show where we're just about on 57 minutes. Are we allowed to talk about music for a couple of minutes?
I mean,
what do you think?
We may be attacked from all angles by certain watchers.
Music and Celtic goes hand in hand. It always has done. The community aspect of singing goes hand in hand with the Irish diaspora coming over. The community aspect of going to the football. You sing on the bus on the way through, you sing at the game, that primal scream element of working all week just to be able to scream and shout and sing on a Saturday as it was back in the day. Music and football goes hand in hand, as does Celtic fans within the music industry. You see a lot of these bands and artists that I love, and I love them even more when they reveal their affection for Celtic. But what I'm going to have to ask you, JP, you, at this stage of the year, won't be back on Acsom until 2022. And I need to ask you your top 3 LPs. These might even be recommendations, if someone out there hasn't actually heard them, of the last 12 months. 2021 top 3 as chosen by JP Mason, and why? Well,
this is not something that I've given extensive thought to. And I used to... when I was writing for Is This Music, Stuart would always ask us at the end of the year to send our top 10, and all the contributors would all be asked for their top 10s, and he would create a point system and then create an Is This Music top 10 or top 20 from all the contributors. And I used to sit down and pore over it for hours, because I was like, I can't just sort of flippantly send him 10 albums and then I'd send them and then I'd be like, oh no, I've forgotten so-and-so's album or this album, and I would be annoyed with myself. So this is definitely a very quick 1, 2, 3. Be no surprise that Mogwai, As Love Continues, is in there. Yes, I know them. Yes, I've been a fan of them for a long time, but I genuinely think this record is up there with the best that they've done. Richie Sacramento, that track is amazing. Sealing Granny, amazing. Sealing Granny, which is from a scene in Exorcist 3. Somebody asked Barry where that track came from, and
I know the scene.
Sealing Granny. So that's from that. Richie Sacramento is what they use as a slang term for the composer Ryuichi Sakamoto. They're like, oh, Richie Sacramento, and so that's that. And just, I suppose like the time it came out in lockdown. I listened to it start to finish on Twitter listening party with Tim Burgess. So it was, getting insight like the Ceiling Granny Patter about each track, and, really felt kind of consumed by the record, and I've listened to it a lot since. So Mogwai, mainly instrumental Scottish post-rock band from Motherwell and surrounding areas. Second would be Arab Strap, As Days Get Dark. First studio album by Arab Strap since I think 2006. Was always going to be something that you were kind of like, oh, hope this is good, because it's Arab Strap, and it's Aidan Moffat, it's Malcolm Middleton, it's two guys that I have got to know as well over the last few years working in the world of music. And when somebody like that, of that sort of stature, is releasing a record, you're always kind of hopeful that it's going to be up to the standard, and it more than delivered. Absolutely phenomenal record, and listened to that a lot as well, and was fortunate to see them live, albeit stripped back, in Paisley as part of the Paisley Spree. They played in the Spiegel tent. I missed the Barrowland shows because I was working a show that night, so I missed them at the Barrowland, which would have been great. And the third is an American artist called Cassandra Jenkins, who probably people haven't heard of, but she's got an album called An Overview on Phenomenal Nature. And my friend Nathan, who runs the Brudenell Social Club in Leeds, which is a tremendous venue, he recommended that album to me. I think he mentioned it in a phone call, and then chased me up on it and said, have you listened to it yet? And then I listened to it, and it's really great. She's an American artist from Brooklyn, and I'm not entirely sure what she's done before that record. I'm pretty sure she's done something, because she's 37 years old. So, but this record, for whatever reason, has really kind of got her a bit of traction, and I would recommend that. So there you go. 3.
Well, I'm going to download all 3 of them, JP. Well, 2 of them, because I've obviously
got Mogwai. Yeah.
So what I'm going to say is, if JP says it's good music-wise, I'm in.
Honourable mention as well too. This was my almost in the top 3, but Olivia Rodrigo's album Sour. I bet you. Well, Lawrence Conley messaged me and was just like, the day that the tickets went on sale, was just like, JP, my daughter's wanting a ticket for this Olivia Rodrigo lassie, and I was like, oh, you too? Aye, no wonder. There's like thousands of people tried to get tickets for that gig at the Academy next year, and they sold out very, very quickly. So I told Lawrence I'd see what I could do, but who knows? But I mean, it's obviously it's pop music, and she's going to be probably as big as the likes of Dua Lipa and Taylor Swift and things like that. But she's really, really good, and the album's great. So there you go.
I love your recommendations, you know that. You tell me to go and what's on, and I'll do it. Going back to the Celtic music crossover, Brian Murphy comes in again. Lads, if you're going to discuss music, can we chat about Thin Lizzy now they were a top band? Yeah, we can. And you might have heard the story before, but a lot of people ask me, having written the book, where did the term the Quality Street Gang come from? Right. So Phil Lynnett's mum, Philomena, had a pub in Manchester, and in that pub drank a gang of guys who were an organised crime group, who didn't have a nickname, but who started dressing like the characters out of the adverts for Macintosh's Quality Street, because they were all dressed like Bugsy Malone characters. And they started coming into the pub, and somebody shouted over, who do they guys think they are? The Quality Street Gang. So that was a real gang in Manchester, and Phil Lynott of Thin Lizzy wrote a song about them called The Boys Are Back in Town. Now, they used to play a wee bounce game on a Sunday, and the manager of the team was Paddy Crerand, and he used to bring over George Best, who I don't know what stage of his career he was at, but he used to play, and he would have a bevy and all the rest of it. So Paddy Crerand became aware of the terminology, the Quality Street Gang. He comes up to Glasgow to meet Jock Stein. Jock Stein introduces him to a few of the up-and-coming players, and they walked in, all dressed, suited and booted, Davy Catanack, Kenny Dalglish, etc. And Paddy Crerand said, who do they think they are? The Quality Street Gang. That's where the name comes from. So there's the seamless transition from music to Celtic. Also, last night at the wedding that I was DJing at, it was the singer from We Were Promised Jetpacks, and Lackey, the drummer in the Jetpacks, his dad was coming up and drunkenly hassling me to play various different bands. You know that guy
or girl that's always at a wedding that hassles the DJ for songs and knows best and knows the crowd, and this will get everybody going. And so he came up and demanded Thin Lizzy last night. Demanded Thin Lizzy. I played The Boys Are Back in Town, genuinely. And I said to him, "Who's your favourite band?" And he said, "The Jetpacks." And I went, "Well, okay, that's because your son's in the band. That makes sense. But, who else?" And he went, "Black Dog Days." And I was like, "Who are Black Dog Days?" I looked him up. Shock, his other son is in Black Dog Days, band from West Lothian. And I'm right, forget them. Like, who's your favourite? Who's the bands that you went to see? Like, who did you go and see live? And he was just like, "Well, saw Queen, saw Thin Lizzy, saw Bad Company, George Michael." And I was like, "Right, now you're talking." And I was like, "Here we go." So I just lined up, played Queen, I Want to Break Free, and then played Boys Are Back in Town. And he was this was during the buffet, by the way. So he's in the middle of the dance floor, spinning round, giving it yeehaw in the middle of the dance floor.
Did he have a kilt on?
He did have a kilt on, of course he did.
I've seen some footage. I'm trying to play some. Somebody just randomly comes in and says, "Stanley Road, yes, Chancellor, I'd have that all day long." But if I'm going to give you, not left field Weller album, there's so many Weller albums, one that you might not have bought into at the time, As Is Now, give that a listen retrospectively. What an album that is, by the way.
Broken Stones.
Absolutely superb, As Is Now. Give it a listen. We like a bit of football, a bit of music and a bit of culture on Acsom, so keep it coming. Brian, again, you've been on the chat all day. Brian, Phil Linnett was a Man U fan. There you go. I think there's a great picture of him with Georgie Best, in actual fact, who also drank at his mum's pub. Philomena Linnett. We could talk all day about football and music, JP. It's been a topsy-turvy year in more ways than one. But big plans for 2022. The question was asked, Celtic podcast, a good thing or a bad thing? We're going to say it's a good thing, and we're going to keep creating content and keep it free for everybody who enjoys it. It's been an absolute pleasure all year to be talking to contributors like JP Mason and others, and you all know who you are. On a Monday, it's myself with Amy Canavan and Tony Haggerty. On a Tuesday, we've got Paddy McGilp, Declan McConville, Lawrence Conley. On a Wednesday, it's Brian Degnan and Colin Watt, Kevin Graham. On a Thursday, it's just you and me. The only day of the week when there's only two. And then on a Friday, we have the aforementioned Jim Orwell, Laura Bradburn, Tony Haggerty, and guest appearances from Jarrett Hill, who comes in from Australia, and Alan Morrison. There are others like Kevin McCluskey and David Slight who chip in as well. Not to forget wee Kevin Tate, who's always in about the chat. So yeah, it's a big team. It's a quality, loyal team, and we are going to be adding to it in the new year. So watch this space. Thanks everybody for getting involved. And thank you once again to JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.